Notion buttons can do a million different things, but in reality, most use cases are either too trivial or you're never going to use them. In this video, I want to show you my 3 favorite use cases for Notion buttons. I think they're quite interesting, but also super practical, and I rely on them every single day in my life operating system. I'll show you not only the real demos, but also exactly how you can build them yourself. And by the way, some of these you've probably never seen before. Let's dive in. The very first use case I haven't seen described anywhere else, and that is to use Notion buttons for habit stacking. A ton of people use Notion to track their habits, and I think it's a great idea. You kind of want to get clear on which daily routines, if done consistently, produce productive and enjoyable days. The process I recommend is actually to first break down your life into specific life domains that you want to optimize, and these would be your fundamentals. And then you map each of those domains to a set of simple routines that you can execute daily, and then you score yourself on the execution of those routines. I've done a whole video about that, so you can go check it out right here. It's a 5-step process. But specifically when it comes to using buttons, let me bring you to my execution zone on a daily cycle. And you can see I have some flow of core checkboxes on the left, and I have a track record of actions right in the middle. But what matters for our point here are these buttons on the top. So this is what I call a masterpiece day structure, and it involves a bunch of buttons that can encapsulate several routines underneath them. By the way, if you want my complete life operating system in Notion that implements all of this and obviously much more, you can click the link below. But back to our masterpiece day structure, if we look specifically at this button right here, let me just demonstrate to you how this works. And what you want to pay attention to is what happens in this area here. So we're going to be adding more actions to our completed list, and also we're going to be checking some checkboxes. So we're going to be obviously completing some routines, because wind down is not just a routine, it's a set of routines. So it's an aggregation or a habit stack. So let me press that and see how it works. So you can see it created this nested structure of actions with sub-actions and sub-actions. So we have a core action of wind down, which is a routine, but then it has 3 routines underneath, which is the reset, review, and planning. And then of course we have some routines underneath reset. And if you look here on the left, when it comes to our checkboxes, it also checked 6 routines. So this is really how habit stacking works, because when I started off, I didn't have all these 6 routines underneath my wind down. But what happened over time is I found I want to add another routine to my daily reset, for example, and I would just add it there. And then every day when I execute wind down, I see this list, and it's very easy for me to add another routine because I'm already in the habit of doing my wind down or doing my daily reset or daily planning. This is exactly what James Clear talks about in the Atomic Habits, but here it's actually coded into your life operating system. So now that you know the specific use case and you've seen the demo of it, let me just show you quickly how to set it up. So first things first, if you want to have a nested view of your actions, you have to enable that. So these are just my tasks, basic actions, to-do items, whatever you want to call them in your system. So these are just actions. And if you want to have them be nested, you want to enable that in the settings. So you go to your settings and you go to sub-items, and that's the place where you can turn it on. And when it comes to the configuration of the button itself, let's just dig into that. What you want to do is, first of all, you would create an action, right? And you can apply a different template to it. So I have a different template for wind down, but that's really not the most important part. The most important part is that once you've created an action, you can then create another action and assign a parent item to it. So in this case, we're creating a wind down, but then our daily reset is created in a very similar way, but we set our parent item to the page added in step 1. So this would be our page that's added in step 1, and then we're basically adding a daily reset underneath. Then you can obviously adjust all the other properties like the date to the time that's triggering. I set my domain, I set done to true, etc. And then if we want to check some checkboxes, we can edit this page, meaning the whole template that's this button is inside of. So in this case, this is my daily cycle, and I have a page created for each specific day. And you can check the checkboxes of routines that you are obviously accomplishing. So in this case, a reset. And at the very end, I'm attaching all these actions to my set of actions for the day. So I look in my days database, days, and I find the day where the start date is today, and I attach a bunch of actions. So everything that we've added in this macro button, I'm adding to the actions property on this specific day. And this is it. So that's for habit stacking. Now you know why it's cool, how to use it, and how to set it up in your specific system. Now let's move to another great use case for buttons, and that's planning your actions. So let me just move to my week. So that was our daily cycle, August 21, and I'm just moving to the current week. Now, if we're going to use buttons for planning our actions, obviously those are going to have to be something that we repeat all the time because they're going to be encoded inside of the button. So the perfect place to use it is in the routines planning step. So we're going to be specifically looking into the clarity and planning section of my weekly template and in the routines planning part. I've done a whole video about my 5-step weekly planning process. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out right here. But let's look into how we use the button. So let me untoggle this routines planning, and you can see we have a button of weekly routines right here, and we have our calendar. Planning my routines is actually the first step out of the 5-step process because I want to make sure that my core review, planning, and other actions are settled into my calendar before I plan anything else. So let's move to the demo and you can see how it works. So let me press the button. Now, this button holds the definitions for all my weekly routines. If you look into the calendar, you can see that I actually have them already planned because it's Thursday and I've already done my weekly planning. But you can see it also created the same actions. So I have my weekly life admin reset, which happens on Saturday, and the button has created such an action as well. So if I just remove a few of these, all I have to do now for my planning is just take this one and drag it here because it happens on Saturday. If I have something that happens on Sunday, like my weekly relationship meeting and my reset day and my review, and the rest happens on Monday, and I already have them planned. But you can see these are exactly these. So you could just select them all and drag them into your calendar so it happens on Monday. So now that you know when to use it in your system, let me just show you how it works. Actually, this button is so much easier and simpler than the previous buttons that we've looked at because all it has is it holds the definitions of these actions and it inserts them as blocks below. If we look into add action, you can see that there's a bunch of things you can do. You can add a page, and one of the things is obviously insert blocks. So this is what you want to select. And the way you get these is simply by taking a specific action that you can already create in your calendar and then dragging it here. So for example, if I drag it here, you can see it disappear from my calendar and it's here. If we go into some specific action, let's say you're creating your weekly digital and systems reset, you would go into that action, make sure it's set up the way you like it. So this is my template for a weekly digital reset. And then when I'm happy with the way it's set up, I just go here and I drag this into my macro button, right? And I do this for all the rest of the actions. And now when I hit done and I hit this button, it's going to create all these. And you can see that I have weekly digital reset here and the ones we've added as well. So this is a perfect way for you to start using macro buttons if you don't want to play around with editing pages or editing properties. You can just drag blocks inside of the button and have them created on repeat. I think this is perfect for planning, but you can obviously use it for many other things. And if you ever want to modify a specific action or a specific block that is created by that button, so let me just, we don't need these, but let's say you want to modify this weekly digital reset. Now, all you do is you drag it into your calendar anywhere, doesn't matter. You go into that block, you make the modifications that you want. Let's say you just modify the text here, and then you just drag it back into the same place where it was, right here. And it's done. Now the next time you use this button and you generate these actions, When you take your weekly digital reset and drag it here, you can see that it will already have your updated template. So let's move to the next use case for the buttons, and this has to do with creating your time cycles. So like days, weeks, months, etc. And this is not as trivial as you might think. On the surface, it seems like, well, we already have a new button and we have templates, and why would we need a separate button for creating our days? Hear me out on this. So first, let me just give you some context. So the reason I'm talking about time cycles is because if you're going to do any tracking in Notion, whether it's actions, projects, you're going to be doing some journaling, tracking any metrics, whatever, like I always suggest you build your system around time cycles. So you always want to have your days where everything happens, and then you have your weeks that aggregates the data from the days and so forth. So this specific template that you can see here is the very basic template that I recommend people start with in Notion that they can easily build themselves. If you want a full tutorial and a free template on how I recommend you start in Notion, you can watch this video here. And this is exactly the template from that video. And the point of that video wasn't just to teach people Notion, but also to get them into the habit of planning their days, tracking some metrics, reviewing, seeing patterns, and so on. So back to the buttons. These are our days. You can see we have a launch a new day button here, and also we have a same button for launching a new week. So let's concentrate on the launching a new day button for now. Let's just click that and see everything that it does so we can see that it's actually not as trivial as you might think. Let's hit that. So you can see there are several things that actually happen. First of all, we obviously created a day with our template, but also we've set the date to current date, which is nice. Not only that, we've also created a name for our day, which is in the same format as our date. Now, otherwise, you would have to type it by hand. There is no way in Notion to say that the template should have this specific format of a name. Okay? The next thing that happened is we found our current week and we've attached this day to the current week. This is, again, very nice because otherwise you would have to do it by hand. But there's actually one more thing that happened that I think is a very cool trick that I don't see people using at all, and I think it's very helpful. So you can see in our daily template, we have a bunch of properties and the database view that's filtered to the current date. Now, the way it's filtered is actually not to just show the date equals to today. Otherwise, what would happen is if we went back, let's go to our cycles. And if we look into some past days, if we had that with, let's say, June 27th, if we went here, you can see it shows June 27th. If our filter in the template was just filtering to today, it would not be showing June 27th. It would be showing whatever date is now. So this is not what we want because sometimes you want to go back and review your data. But what we've done here is actually behind the scenes, we've set a specific property called this page, and we've set it to the page of the template. Okay? In this case, when we go to our filter, we can filter by this date. The way this is done, if we look into our template for the day and hit edit, you can see this filters, it filters to the template. So whenever a template is created, it would be set to this specific page. And all of this was possible because of the button. So let's collapse this. Let's go back to our cycles and let's see how it actually works. Let me hit this edit button and you can see everything that it does here. It's actually 5 things that it does. So it sets the date to the date triggered. This is one property that we added. Another property we set is the name. Now, this is a very simple formula. We do the formatting for the now date and we use this format. Very helpful because you don't have to do that typing. Next, we added that property that I talked about, this page, which helps us to do the filtering for the specific template. And you can see we just replace it with the page added. Another thing we do, which I haven't talked about, but quite nice, when we add the page, we also open it in full view because the way you use this button is usually in the morning. You open your Notion, you want to launch a new day, you hit the button, so you want to be taken immediately to the template so you can input your morning data. This is very nice that we can immediately do that from the button. And the last thing that it does is it looks into the week's database and it applies a filter where start date is relative to today, this week. So this is how we can capture the current week, and we can take the current page that we're adding and add it to the days property on that week. So this is our button, and this is exactly how you configure this button. So these are my very top 3 use cases for buttons in Notion. You've got your habit stacking, which of course I use every single day many times. You've got your routines planning, which I use at least weekly for weekly planning, but also I have a very similar button for planning my monthly and quarterly routines and so on. And you've got your cycle creation buttons, which of course you would use every single day. I think that's very helpful, and you can use it for creating your weeks. And of course you can adapt that idea and create other pages in your Notion. The reason I wanted to show you cycles is because it has more functionality. If we talked about creating, like for example, a new note, that would be super simple. You would just create a page in a database and apply a template to it. That's not interesting enough. I wanted to show you something that you probably haven't seen before. So I hope that was helpful. Go ahead, apply those to your system. And of course, if you want access to my full system, then check the link below. And as always, good luck on your life optimization journey.